Thank you, Brian. Hi, Grey New York. I'm Lachlan Campbell, CEO and co-founder of ProAgni. I'm also a fifth-generation livestock farmer. And this is the wool stencil my great-grandfather used. That wool with that stencil went around the world, and that very stencil inspired the ProAgni logo. But the way things stand, I may be a fifth and last generation farmer. A last generation farmer like the 40% of cattle ranchers that have left their farms since the 1980s. The thing is, the way we farm livestock today is not environmentally sustainable. It's resource intensive, the methane it produces contributes to global warming, and the antibiotics it uses contribute to antimicrobial resistance. And just as importantly, it is not economically sustainable. While the price of beef in the US has doubled in the past decade, farming has never been less profitable. That cannot go on. But what if all that could change? What if the assumption that sustainable production will cost more was wrong? Because it is. What if we could produce milk and meat more cheaply with less methane output and fewer antibiotics? Because we can. At ProAgni, that's what we do. Our go-to guy is Professor Athol Cleve. Athol made researching the microbiome of cattle, sheep and kangaroos his life's work. His work is the inspiration for our solutions, and around that inspiration, we've built a dynamic team with all the right pieces. Science, business, finance, marketing, law, QA, and most of them with heritage as grassroots farmers. Now, here's some really cool science. Cattle produce energy from what they eat by fermenting it in the rumen. The quality of that fermentation drives the speed at which they gain weight. It drives the amount of feed they consume along the way, and it drives the amount of methane they produce. Quality of fermentation is everything, and that is driven by the bacteria that do that fermentation. So here's the thing. Livestock do not create methane. The bugs in the rumen do. Without the right bugs, the rumen is just a badly tuned car. It is all about the bugs. Our solution has two approaches. The first is ProTect. ProTect is a complete premix for intensive feeding systems like feed yards and dairy. ProTect gets added to the feed at 1 to 5%. Second are direct-fed microbials, and we'll get to that later. So let's start with ProTect. ProTect is already in market in Australia and could be made in New York State tomorrow. So how does it work? It is a prebiotic that directly supports the bugs already in the rumen that increase the efficiency of that fermentation. The key is stability of ruminal pH. At high pH, methane-producing bugs thrive and methane is burped off. At low pH, lactic acid-producing bugs thrive and the animal becomes either ill or dies. And this is where antibiotics are required on a daily basis. At either end of the pH scale, high or low, production efficiency goes down and it costs the farmer time and money. ProTect is unique because it enables pH stability at both ends. And the way it does that is so novel and inventive that the formulation has been granted a patent. But why do farmers buy ProTect? For many, it is not about methane or antibiotics. Using ProTect, they get more productive animals while spending less on feed, sometimes 20% less. ProTect makes farmers more money. It is as simple as that. They replace their current feed additive with ProTect, it is competitively priced, and suddenly they can differentiate their product to consumers. So it is not surprising that some of our farmers are now investors in ProAgni. We can have heated debates about antibiotics and climate change, but profit is a universal language. We track the success of ProTect in 4 ways, and with these metrics, our traction to date is as follows. We have fed over 1.5 million animals. That's more than twice the size of New York State's dairy herd. We have reduced to over 270 tonnes of methane. We have removed over 2,300 pounds of antibiotics and saved farmers over 25,000 tonnes of feed. We scaled Protect in Australia by targeting feed mills and licensing the patented formulation to them. The feed mill sells directly to large producers and to farm supply stores, who then sell to smaller producers. We support this by providing significant sales, marketing and technical support on the ground. So the value propositions for the mills are, firstly, it gives them a new innovative product to sell with strong sustainability themes. And antibiotics that are used for cattle are toxic to horses. So for the mills that also service horse markets, using Protect also avoids the risk of cross-contamination. That is a big deal. ProAgni gets to market faster as the mill already has a customer base and we don't tie up capital in a plant. We earn our revenue via a royalty from the volume the mill sells. On average volumes, it's around 10 cents per animal per day. That is about $40 per animal per year. With 630,000 dairy cows in New York State and 25 million beef cattle on feed in the US, that's a big opportunity. In 2018, we started in one store in my home county, and now we've got national manufacturing and distribution. It has taken off. Protect is now in stores in every state in Australia. And we scaled rapidly, working with mills and starting with smaller producers. We used that momentum to build data and reputation to then acquire large producers. Now, we can employ that approach in New York State. The ingredients for Protect are already available in the US. They are pre-approved by the FDA and can be readily milled here. So we're confident we can deliver to and for upstate New York. Thanks to Grow New York, we've been able to meet the key contacts in the entire supply chain, from research through to producers. And for all those people on this slide, we cannot thank you enough for that opportunity. That is Protect. But this is what really excites me. In our development pipeline are direct-fed microbials for exactly the same customers. ProAgni is the first company in the world to shelf-stabilise and directly feed anaerobic bacteria to ruminants. So what? Well, most bacteria in the rumen are anaerobic and they have superpowers. Superpowers like consuming lactic acid, which allows us to transition livestock to an intensive diet in 3 days. This normally takes up to 21 days, and the time and feed savings of shortening that makes producers well over $100 per animal. We can do that because we know the bugs and we know their superpowers. But here are the home runs. The first is we know that it is the anaerobic bugs that make cows burp methane, and we've identified the ones that do not. For those bugs, their superpower is to instead create energy for the animal. And second, up until now, all this required cold chain storage. And we have patented technology that gives us shelf stability at room temperature. So there is no cold chain storage and you simply add them to feed. So feed costs go down alongside methane production, and sustainability goals do not cost farmers money. Which brings us to upstate New York. The chicken nuggets in a New York City school cafeteria are produced antibiotic-free and have been for 7 years. The chicken farmer gets a price premium for this. But where's the premium for dairy farmers for their milk in that same cafeteria? If we're successful at Grow New York, we will spend every dollar of any award here and reinvest net revenue on top of that for 3 years. We will establish a base in New York to bring Protect to the dairy market. Now, this will create between 8 to 13 direct local jobs and create a platform for dairy, beef, and sheep for the US. We've already engaged with your world-class academic institutions and academics to further our research agenda. Now, here is what Associate Professor Joe McFadden at Cornell says about our unique approach. Ideally, we'd establish an Institute of Ruminal Microbiology here and kick off with a consortium bringing all stakeholders together. Protect is a cost-saving technology that will benefit all New York State and will create more than 30 indirect local jobs. If we can get 10% of the New York dairy herd on Protect, we will remove 33,000 pounds of antibiotics and 815 tonnes of methane every year. I want to slow global warming down as much as the next guy. But why should we as farmers and the generations of farmers to come pay a disproportionate cost for just producing what the world needs, food? The vision for ProAgni is to ensure that it costs producers less to have a cleaner world, and we've developed the tools to do it. Thank you.
Really well done. Lachlan and Warren, joined by Warren now. You came through loud and clear. We're going to hit you with some questions now. Over to you, Mary Shellman.
Lachlan, thanks so much, and just congratulations on the success of taking a product like this that's so important to the world into the distribution across Australia. So as you think about coming to the US, are there things in the market here that are just substantially different than the Australian market and would create challenges to the adoption that, that you would have to overcome?
Thank you, Mary. Interestingly enough, in the 4 to 5 weeks we've spent working with Grow New York and ESD, we found in that time it's a very familiar landscape. To give you some sense of that, I think we've got a commercial opportunity here that we developed in 5 weeks that took us nearly 2 years to develop in Australia, because every one of those is a cold call. So the barriers and the audience are really interested in hearing what we've got to say and what we've got to offer.
And what we've noticed as well is a lot of the conversations are very similar. They have a different accent, but producers care about their animals, they care about feeding their family, and they care about the environment. And those things don't really change.
Okay, over to you, Laura Peterson.
Hi, thanks for being with us virtually anyway. And yeah, this is very interesting, especially when we're talking about methane and the whole global climate change. It wasn't clear from the information I had about what jobs you expected to create in the Grow New York area. Could you expand on that a bit?
Absolutely. So we don't get into the manufacturing end. So manufacturing jobs will be created with our milling partners. But what we do is we provide sales and technical support. So on the one hand, on the operational level, it's sales and technical folks. But equally, part of our plan would be to move a large part of our research agenda to academic institutions there. So that creates jobs on that end as well.
Great. Any follow-ups on that? Or over to you, Annie.
Hi, ProAgni team. Quick question about your partnerships. Have you established any partnerships there that actually will translate here? And if you could speak to maybe some of the partnerships that could accelerate the adoption.
So we've established really good partnerships with feed mills and distributors here. And that's what's driven our footprint from, one store back in the day to national footprint. We've started to develop those partnerships with mills in the US. It'll take time. So that's one part of that partnership picture that's really important. The other part is academic institutions. We are very research driven. We are fully aware that, every farm sees a feed supplement salesman at the farm gate every day. So we try and differentiate ourselves on research and data. And we're developing those relationships mainly with Cornell to produce research and data there and to move a large part of our research agenda.
Look, we've also had long conversations with nutritionists such as Greg Johnson, Gold Star Feed Mills. There's a myriad of them. We've been extraordinarily busy talking right through from research to end user. And to a person, they've been extraordinarily engaged and extraordinarily interested for the same reason that all of us do, that you've got to make a profit for the farmer and leave a better world.
That's great. Okay, over to you, John C.
Gentlemen, congratulations on what looks to be an incredible breakthrough there. And so I'm curious, as you try to break into this U.S. market, what do you perceive as the greatest risk, and what are you going to do about that?
Look, the greatest risk is always getting people to change. And we started, I'm going to be completely honest, trying to lecture producers about methane and antibiotic use. And that was entirely the wrong approach. The approach we take now is to start with economics and sometimes never even mention those issues. And that, strangely, is actually what success looks like. So I think we've got the tools to overcome those barriers to adoption, and they've been learned, the hard way at the coalface.
Over to you, Mary Shellman.
Now, kind of building on that, do you have any sense of what was the sales cycle for adoptions in Australia, and what do you think it might be here, to begin with, and how will that move over time?
We've looked at that sales cycle in two ways. So with smaller producers, it's actually a relatively short sales cycle because they're willing to give it a go and they have less intermediaries involved. With the larger producers, it's a longer sales cycle and you just keep chipping away and chipping away. But the one thing that's really curious about this market is everybody talks. So if a small guy has results with our product, as they often do, the big guys find out about it. So while the big end is a longer sales cycle, the small end actually helps prime that pump really effectively.
Great. Excellent. Laura Peterson.
You may have mentioned this, but I think I missed it. Was there any difference in the milk production from these cows, either positive or negative?
What we've seen is no change in the outputs at all. And in cattle, we've seen positive improvements in carcass dressing, which is the amount of usable meat produced, and in grading.
Wow, excellent. Over to you, Annie.
Yep. Guys, so a lot of this is hinging on the ability to reduce methane emission. How have you measured that, and how do you quantify that, especially as we're all expecting that this will become a real crux of, for the cattle, whether they're dairy or cattlemen, wanting to be able to capture that and report that as a positive. So how are you doing that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and the units of measurement are still kind of unestablished and bouncing around a bit. We've done direct methane chamber studies where we have measured direct methane output in controlled environments against control groups. That has worked in our favour. And we also use a whole load of statistical models that basically calculate methane production off animal feed intake. And what they give us is a methane reduction of somewhere between 10 and 30%.
Excellent.
Is there going to be a way for the farmers to capture that in a reportable way? Because especially as we, look 5, maybe 2, 3, 4 years down the road, being able to report that reduction, I think, is going to be more and more important. So I don't know if you guys have anything you can share on that.
Yeah, totally agreed. And down the track, we believe they'll be able to monetize that reduction as well. But we didn't want to develop a product that required a carbon trading market or a methane trading market to make it economically viable. So we think that will develop, but that's kind of icing on the cake. Right now, farmers can buy a product that reduces their methane output without having to sell credits into a secondary market. And they'll do that just because it makes economic sense for them to do it today. We don't need that market to develop in the future. Great.
Okay. Any more questions coming down the pike? Mary Shellman.
Okay, I've always got one more question. So going back to the questions about that Laura asked about jobs in the region. So can you have you thought yet about what it's going to look like? What's your sales structure? How you're going to go about that, and kind of the number of that organization, and the layers of it?
Yeah, I mean, Locke can talk to that too, but I mean, we've basically got a sales plan mapped out, and it's based on sales and technical support per user and per head. So our primary driver to everything is the number of animals that we're feeding. And that number drives the number of salespeople you need, the number of technical support people you need, etc. And we've mapped that out in pretty granular detail for that market.
That's great.
We'd anticipate quite comfortably between 8 to 13 direct local jobs within the 2 or 3 years of landing in upstate New York. And that's been really from the experience that we've seen in Australia, which is a much thinner market, I might add, as well.
That's great. Well, we're out of time. You did fabulous, ProAgni. Let's give them a hand.